Welcome, everybody, particularly our audience in the ether. There should be 50 people outside the Guild, and we have a small, well-chosen selection inside the Guild this evening. So this is the third webinar of the Mentoring Initiative at the Guild. The previous meetings were on collaboration and design for manufacture. And these are part of the Guild online archive. So they are going to be preserved. We'll have our final mentoring webinar this year on November the 28th on the subject of accessing new markets. And please, all of you out there, as well as in the building itself, do come along to that meeting. So this is a broadcast event. And as I keep saying, there should be 50 faces out there, which we have to imagine as we're standing in the Guild. Mentoring at the Guild, just to give you some background, is it partners with the outreach group, and outreach is perhaps more focused on educational issues than the mentoring initiative. Mentoring, to put it very simply, is post-education. Its aim is to be there to field questions from professional artists that rise out of their professional practice. Mentoring is a long-term arrangement, there to encourage and advise. There's no curriculum, no qualification certificate, no quality assurance. It's just mentee to mentor, professional to professional. Now, events such as this one this evening is a shop window, of course, for the Guild, especially now that our events are often broadcast and viewable for all over the world. So we are, in the common parlance, a global influencer now. We have some 400 members in the Guild, and many are prepared to take up the mentoring challenge, and it's of course a free service. So it is to be hoped, again speaking to the 50 people looking in on us this evening, that in our physical and online audience, there are people interested to take up our offer. Please do speak to us or contact us afterwards. The platform will develop the theme for the first part of the evening, and we'll be about an hour doing that, perhaps a little less. And then we'll open up for questions for 30 minutes. But do please feel that you can contribute from the outset. We are especially keen to have questions from the Zoom audience. So in other words, please interrupt. So our platform team here tonight, and welcome to you all. We have Lucy, who is a painter. We have Tasman, who is a sculptor. We have Fleur, who is a textile artist, and we have Nick, who is a photographer. And I think that selection of very different approaches to creativity is very important to communicate to the world at large. That we are a very, very varied organization that has many, many different practices within it. And we hope that that has in itself an appeal to those who are looking for mentoring. The theme for this evening's event is moments of change. So just to introduce that subject, and perhaps to hope that this theme will be one that you can comment on, even controversially, and perhaps within the environment here have some opposite opinions of those which seem to be being promoted. So just to offer you as a start to the evening, many guildsmen have been working in the creative industries for a lifetime. And while appearing to be successful and doing important work, have not found their career has been one of just steadily producing more, better, or of establishing a steady and growing income. You know, it appears that everything has been as arranged, but actually, I think we all know that there have been moments of immense change within a long creative practice. The need for adapting our creative energies and ideas to the ever-changing market and fluctuating demand for our output is perhaps now more critical than it has ever been. The current volatile economy, global uncertainties, and ongoing challenge of new technologies transfixes all of us, but artists can be especially vulnerable in this environment. They can also, however, make it a fulcrum for new achievement. in looking at this as a subject, as for the theme of changes, I've been very conscious that change can be considered automatically as a negative. And I think for this evening, it would be really good to try to see change absolutely as a positive thing for us to engage with, particularly as artists. So I've got some starting points for this evening's discussion. And the first one, which I should be hoping our platform team will be able to engage with, is change actually part of our purpose as artists? Our reflection on change can inspire our voice and can provide the motifs through which our work is recognized. We can control change no more than anyone else, but we may feel it more. We have always had the tools and ideas to make it a useful response. So that's our first chance. I now have to go and see if I can. It's always a little bit low for me, so I sort of stagger into it. So who would like to take up the first idea about that? Is change actually part of our purpose as artists? Nick.
Yes.
Yes, you've got another one.
Yes. Well, in my working life, it is recording and sharing and conveying ideas about change in the very nature of what I do. I photograph things changing, and, from a purely creative point of view. That's really what I do. I record a moment within a constantly changing environment, really, I think. I mean, my day-to-day work is often in construction, which is very definitely about change, good or bad. And also, it's fascinating from a creative and a sociological and physical point of view to see all the different elements of what I do, it appears in front of me, and how I can record them and share them with people, good and bad. It's a strange way of seeing things, really, and quite analytical because you sort of stand back and look at something which is potentially mundane, but there seems to be a lot more to it than that. And I feel that it's really part of that, why you become a photographer. It's because you want to record change or something that is changing. And I think in working practice, purely technical point of view, the advent of digital materials has changed a lot. The ability to manipulate images, the ability to disseminate changes have all come along, and I don't feel negative about any of it. These changes have enabled, definitely. I really appreciate that. I can do things I couldn't have done before on shooting film. I'm not a purist in that sense. And I think it's great that these things happen. I really do. But everything has a downside. It's easy to.
You were brought up in a creative environment, and indeed
Yes.
your father was a photographer.
Yes, he was.
Do you feel that your approach to your craft is very different to the way he approached his craft, and in response to the time that he was making it and the time that you're making it?
Well, I think it is, yes. I mean, I think anybody who works in creative ways will have their own, well, they should allow themselves to show things in their own way. My father worked on the Cambridge News, and he recorded events. That's what he did. That was his forte as well. And I was less aware of what he actually did in that respect when I was young, but when he died, I became far more aware of what he had done that I didn't really know about. In latter years, when I was just working with him, we did something very different from what he did when he was on the newspaper. And it was fascinating to realize that he had that other life in a way that I didn't, because that was before I was born, actually, in the 1950s. And, and it was about events, it was about people. And obviously in the newspaper, that's definitely about change. But I never ever taught him about his motivation for being a photographer. He started out on Hunstanton Beach as a beach photographer back in the day when such things existed. He used to talk about that, but not about much. He talked about the people. That, my point of view, it's just something I've found myself doing, and I still am. My relationship with clients is long, and most of the time, and it's developing relationships with people, and they understand how you show what they do. Particularly working with architects, as I do, and sharing my vision of what they do, and trying to understand what they're trying to do, trying to reflect how I feel about it, how people interact with what they do, and that's really where I'm coming from, I think.
So if you were to be talking to someone starting off in the photographic trade or business, you'd be communicating to them much more about their motivations for taking photographs, rather than here to go, they're gone tomorrow technologies.
No, not at all.
It's much more about place,
completely,
and people, and response, which is, I think, something that we all very much feel that we can share.
I hope so.
Shall I pass it on to somebody else? You work with young. Taz, you work with young people a lot, but also are looking at new technologies and old practices, and finding ways through for combining those and inspiring change that's in people's ideas, as well as the development of your own practice ideas. And you've even brought some objects for us.
Yes, I have. Should I fish them out, or shall I respond first?
Respond first.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I do work with young people. I am a technical tutor at Camberwell College of Art in the ceramics department. But my background's actually, when I left school, I was a carpenter. I did that for about 13 years. That's my background. But before that, when I was at school, and all the way through, actually, I've always noodled around with clay. My first interest was really figurative, and that's kind of what got me into art school as a mature student. I have experimented and played a little bit with some of the new digital tools which have come along and are sort of readily available in art schools. 3D printers, laser cutters, scanning facilities. But I do maintain that first interest, which is modeling in clay and observing and trying to capture a likeness. It's something I've always done and I've always enjoyed, and I probably will always do. The technologies which I play with now, sort of, I think they sit quite well together, but I know that it's the immediate response from the material that I really like. That's what excites me, and that's always the starting point. Even just to work out a simple idea, a rough sketch in clay, even rather than drawing, is what I would always go to. That's what I do.
Have you found that there's advantages with the opportunities of working now with all the techniques that are available to make things in one way and then to make them in an entirely different way for a different purpose?
There are certainly advantages. That's not to say that there aren't other ways of doing it, a more hands-on, analog way. And I do enjoy the challenge. I'm actually probably partly to do with my carpentry background. I'm a bit of a frustrated engineer. I like pattern making, mold making, and things like that. You know, thinking about things the reverse way around, and that is for people who are interested in sort of digital technology. That's a bit of a gift, really. There's things that you can do so much easier. That's not to say that you can't do them in the traditional way. People still have those skills. They are rare and they are lovely. And I have always been very keen to, acquire new skills when necessary. But it's just a means to an end, really. It's just another set of tools. I wouldn't pit one against another. And I wouldn't say that you should definitely do this, explore this new area or new opportunities, or I think each to their own, whatever it's going to do it for you.
So the power of the idea is still preeminent.
Yes, absolutely. In both higher education and also in my profession where I teach, it's very much within ceramics, but that's not really what I do. That's kind of my day job. I do a lot of other things, pattern making for cast metal, large scale public art, all sorts really. Has some design work in there too. We'll show you a couple of bits, very small. But the reason why I mention that is because I'm not a purist, and some people come to a particular discipline with an idea and the baggage that's associated with that discipline. Ceramics is actually really, really broad. It's like a whole range of different practices loosely held together by the use of this material. Some of the skills and the things that you acquire, the knowledge, they're really hard earned and they are transferable. And it's really nice to be able to say, if you can do this, you can definitely do this too. Have you thought about pushing this on into another material or something like that? As I said before, I really like and admire people who have a singular focus and who at an early age home in on that and really master that. But I seem destined to flip butterfly like from one thing to another. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Shall we pass on to Lucy? Because Lucy, you're a painter, but you, as so many of us within our generation, found that exploring areas of the media became something that you had to pass through. I was certainly in that position of passing through that. So was that change something that was natural? Was something that you were happy to engage with at that time? Or was it something you were happy to have passed through and returned to, something which is much closer to the heart?
Well, you're right. I started off as a painter and then moved probably about 10 years after leaving art school, started working media arts and then at a certain point went back, did a complete cold turkey and decided I wasn't going to spend my life in front of a screen. And I bought a number of sketchbooks. Actually, I think it was when I bought my third sketchbook and had literally not drawn anything in because they were the wrong size, or that I realized I just was terrified of actually starting to make drawings and working with my hands again. And so I sort of kicked myself and got on with it and started making funny little cartoons. There's something that's quite difficult about if you have a sort of interim phase where you get back into a sort of, it's a different starting point. You can't just pick up where you left off. But I think that there are times when I felt like I was wearing too many different hats and or too many different heads, and it felt a little bit split between that idea of being an artist and then working probably more in a curatorial role with media arts. And I really missed the that ability to make something with my hands that only I can make. And I went back into making. I work from I think the sense of touch is really important to my way of working. I work from memory and imagination. So the work I make is like really only work that I can make. But I feel that the media arts work probably could have been done by other people. So I can see a sort of value and sense in terms of the work that I make now. Not that it wasn't rewarding working with the media arts. And I have found some working a little bit with animation, drawn animation, a way of sort of incorporating some of my technology skills and some of my drawing, art, painting, sort of part of my practice as well. I think I don't know if that answers.
Well, I think it is interesting. We're certainly, in my view, in a position where we understand what new technology has done for us, and we're perhaps through various reasons to do with the resurgence in the appreciation of making, that perhaps, speaking generally of artists here who have had at least 40 years experience, that we're able to look at perhaps a better distance of what has really gone on. And that closer involvement that we had with the developments in technology have perhaps are better understood by us. And in the return that perhaps we're all making to our first loves, we're interpreting those changes in a very different way. And perhaps it falls ironically to us, the older generation, yet again, to make the initiatives for a way forward for creativity, because we're probably able uniquely to look at technological change in the way that we can because of our prior experience, whereas those who are 20, 40 years older, younger than us, won't have had that experience of being without those technologies.
No, I mean, that's completely right. And what, in the late 90s, I set up a media arts lab in a photography department. At the time we called what we did new media, and that term is just meaningless now because
it's not new anymore. It's just media.
It's new, exactly.
Yes.
But it was sort of very, at that moment in the late 90s, it, just as a give a little context. I mean, the department that I worked in had one online computer that the head of the department had. Students had to go, if they wanted to check email, if they had an email account, needed to go down to the library. So there's sort of omnipresent, and I think there was a period then when it was very playful, and then now it's just there. And so what people, how people use it, I think is, it's there's no novelty. It's another way of working. It's another tool, but an important one.
To bring in Fleur here. Now, you want me to hold it so you can wave your...
Thank you.
So Fleur likes to use her hands, so I have to hold the microphone, which is absolutely fine. I think that is an aspect of creativity. I was wondering whether your connections with exploring art and its engagement with science, the vascular work that you've been doing, is something which is of intrigue, and that involves a technology and an old practice. There's something that you might say there. I'm hoping the hands are going to move.
Yes, they are. The reason I was brought in to work medically is because there is actually a historic thing between what I do as a lace maker and embroidery.
Has it gone off? Do I press the button? Who's testing? Testing, yes, we're right.
Yes.
It's gone off.
Okay, so I shall repeat.
Yes, yes.
There is a big historical connection between what I do as a lace maker and embroiderer and specifically the world that I was observing originally of vascular surgery, because my techniques are their techniques and they learnt their techniques from my forebears, as it were, not my personal ones, but from my sort of creative forebears. I learnt from them. So I didn't have to go in a scientific way. I just took in my 400-year-old skills and was able to observe what they were doing. But the work I've done around that has encompassed work that I've been doing all of my career, because my career has constantly changed right from the beginning. In fact, that's all I ever do, is reinvent myself. And that reinvention plays a great part in the piece of work that comes next. So I've ended up now, the work I've been working on the past 2 years encompassed every change that my career has gone through from the moment I left college, which has been considerable.
Well, that's fantastic to hear that actually you've thoroughly embraced change as a motif.
I can't say I embraced it to begin with. At the beginning, there was this idea, because I started off as a fashion designer, that was what I was going to be. And there was a slow realization when I looked at the other people's careers that most people's careers in fashion didn't last that long. And, you know, you kind of don't want the penny to drop on that one, because you don't think, I've just been at college for 3 years, this is my life. And then you realize that you're going to have to change. And the biggest part of that change every time is your identity and how you position yourself within that change. You know, who are you while the change is happening? You know, while there's chaos and you don't know what you're going to be doing next, who are you then? And then when that change does come about, you then have to work out what your identity is as that new thing. And it could be that not a good change for you. You know, I've had to take on part-time work that I wasn't exactly very happy about. And I had to decide who I was as an artist doing a very mundane job. And then there can be a fantastic change where you, like when I began the medical residencies, of who was I walking into a hospital as an artist and what did that mean? And I was the first person to observe surgery in nearly 50 years to do this. And, you know, don't even think about that responsibility. So I had to take on everything I'd learned about change in my career, as it has changed about 7 times, to cope with another change.
So really, the task of the mentoring initiative is very much to encourage younger artists at the start of their career to thoroughly embrace the issue of change and to feel that it is probably the most important motivating factor in their life. And perhaps at the moment where they feel that there is any feeling of settling, that's the moment they should be most concerned about their relevance, really, if they're not as alive to the opportunities of change as they can be.
I think it's change. It sounds very glib to say that it's very necessary, but you have to keep learning. You have to keep being better at what you do. And the best bit of advice I was ever given at the beginning simply was, follow your bliss. What makes you blissful? Not what makes you happy or what you love, because that can really get you into trouble. But to follow your bliss, what really raises you up and follow that. And I've always done that. And that has meant that everything I've learned and everything I've done have always been relevant to each other. No matter what was changing, whatever I was doing outside of that change was relevant and necessary eventually.
So there's a very, and this is an obvious comment really, but as an artist, you know, we are very close to what we do. You know, there's the division that most of us would like to feel it exists between our work and ourselves. It exists not so much for an artist. And as we develop ourselves, we are potentially developing our art.
Yes, I think even if you're looking at your work in a commercial way, you are the most important facet in your business.
Mhm.
And so you have to develop, like any business has to develop, you personally have to. And it's more relevant now than ever because there's a hunger for change in the industry. I mean, sometimes that can feel a little bit negative, it can feel a little bit vampiric, particularly for young people. There's so many of you out there all trying to get the same thing. And it's the view that develop yourselves inside and stay true to what you want to be doing, that you actually come out best in the end.
That's a very positive message. Is there any, there's no questions coming in from our 50 people outside. Is there any questions coming in from our physical audience at the moment? Or perhaps can you just hold that? Just I'll move on to the next controversial theme. Yes, sure. I'll just bring you your theme.
Since nobody else has asked any questions, the extremely interesting. How's that? Right? Good. Extremely interesting. The contributions the people have made, attacking the question from all sorts of angles. Would you mind just reminding me what the original wording of the question was? I think I've got the gist of it, but how did you actually phrase it?
Well, it was really just about change as a motivating factor for artists. I mean, what I'd put is change actually part of our purpose as artists? You want to?
I think maybe there are two different things here. One is a motivating factor, which is obviously a personal thing, and the other is whether promoting change or helping people to understand change, which of course are two very different things. Whether that is part of our duty, and I think artists. I'm not an artist, but I'm a historian. And I'm a historian of architecture, and so how architects, how builders have responded to social and economic changes is central to what I do, and I think probably the responses of artists and makers to changes in society is what is what we're talking about. It seems to me that there are obviously artists, creators have a duty to their clients. They have a duty towards anybody who asks them for advice, whether it's technical advice or advice about how they should respond to society's demands, how they may respond to their clients' demands, and so on. But insofar as I'm not sure that artists and creators have any duties beyond that. Artists and creators can I think help people to understand change, help people in their responses to change, they deepen their responses to change, all of which are extremely valuable things, and these are some these are some of the things that do make artists useful to society. But I don't see this in any sense of a duty that artists have.
Thank you very much, Liz. Yes. Alice.
Hi, so I've got a question for Fleur actually, because I think I can relate with possibly more than anyone. I'm a fashion designer myself, and I started my own business just over 18 months ago. And hopefully there's some others on the Zoom call who are experiencing the same things as I. But like you said, taking on board work just so you can get by, how do you deal with keeping up morale, but also following that bliss? So creating wearable pieces for my customers is what gives me bliss, but I also have bills to pay. So how do you deal with the morale and keeping that up and not losing the love for what you do?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I can't say that it's an easy thing to do. I think now a lot of people talk about self-care. My idea of self-care was to go to the V&A as much as possible and to just stick myself to the cabinets and to try and absorb everything that I hadn't learned at college. I came out of college and then realized that I didn't know anything. So it was indulging myself in everything that I loved, and it didn't have to be fashion related. It just had to be as soon as I got in that building, basically. And every time I felt, I think, oh God, I've got to try and do this thing again, and I've got to try and please someone, and pleasing other people never worked for my work, which is why I don't do fashion anymore. But I could go and I could learn something, and then I could put it into my work. And that made me feel that even if it financially wasn't accruing a lot at that point, what I was doing instead was mentally accruing a kind of wealth. And those things that I learned then still come up. It didn't matter where my career kept changing, that as long as I was looking at the things I loved, they made me happy. And just trying to engage with those things all the time, but it's not easy at all. I mean, I did a market stall for a couple of years. So I was getting up very early in the morning and standing there in the cold, and people come along and they say rude things about your work. And sometimes they buy them, and you'd go home and think, okay, I've just got enough money. I've just got enough money. And you got by. You just have to say, there is an old saying, I think it's along the lines of, all this too shall pass. It will always change.
So kind of taking a step back from your bliss in a way, just to take time for yourself, was never damaging to your practice. It only healed it and made it better.
No, I mean, as I said, I thought I saw myself as the business. If I wasn't okay, the business suffered. So if I knew about stuff that made me happy, then it was okay. And I'm still here. It sounds very glib to say that, but you think I did manage it. I did work out okay. Eventually, although in the moment feels like bloody chaos.
Yeah. Thank you.
Richard,
Fleur, you didn't stop loving the things you loved, and you still were able to go and look at them and get a few inspirational nutrients, if that's the word.
It was.
And
like
that
nutrition.
is a really special thing, I think.
Yes, and I mean, that's I don't want to keep repeating, but don't want to keep repeating myself, but it is vital to be passionate about your work and vital to be constantly interested in your work. And however it's changing, you have to be passionate in that.
I thought it was really interesting what you said about sticking to what you loved. And maybe, isn't there some funny saying about a clock? If you keep moving it 5 minutes on all the time, it's not right as often as if it sticks to its time. You know, there's sort of something there, isn't there?
Yes.
That you'd be more right if you know what you love and stick to it. Although that's a really hard thing to do, because sometimes you don't know who you love or what you love, but still.
No, it took me a long time to find that confidence, because I started off as a fashion designer, as I said, market stalls. Then I went into shops. Then there was a big crash in the Japanese economy that took my business with it. And I had to restart again. And I restarted as a textile designer and as a packaging designer, would you believe? And then that was successful. And then that was kind of, they took it all out of my hands. So that business ended. And I thought, you know, I'm sick of pleasing other people. It never really works for me. I thought, sod it. I'm going to learn the most niche craft there is, because I've always wanted to learn to do this. And that's when my career really took off.
That is the most encouraging thing anyone could hear in years. Got to pass this on now.
Yes, thank you for that, Bridget. I'm trying to keep the theme going here, but when I was promoting the idea of students going into art college, and we were told very forcibly by the university creative arts sector that the creative industries were responsible for something like £70 billion of revenue in the UK alone. And we're trying to promote the idea, which may or may not be true, that there are more opportunities and support for artists than there have ever been. So why are we still thinking that artists are struggling in the modern era? Because there are opportunities, especially now that we have the opportunity of connecting with audiences that may be many thousands of miles away from us. We can find people who like and want the things that we make, probably in a way that we never could before. So I wonder whether we as individuals are taking the opportunities that are actually there for us. They are low-hanging fruit, as it were, for us. I don't know if anybody wants to contribute to that.
Well, I mean, social media has certainly opened up avenues for various people. Some people use it very well. Other people have people to do that for them. Even museums and galleries are really very well represented today. So that is obviously a practical way to communicate. It's said that the internet and social media brings people together. And I would suggest that there's some people who perhaps shouldn't be brought together. No. Okay. I wanted to say that with regard to being true to who you are and what you do, even from an early age, as I said, figurative is what I have always done. And there's some examples here of work. Funnily enough, all of it was made when I was a student, but not to this scale. They're all 3D printed, but they've been sort of through digital means pushed on and changed in various ways. This head that you can see, well, I won't touch. Okay, that's a life-size head of a fellow student when I was undergraduate, Sylvester. I don't know what he's doing now, but you know, and I printed that at home just last week, actually, on a 3D printer. When I was an undergraduate, I was doing this sort of work, but I was also really preoccupied with design. I was making a ceramic chair, and my tutors were absolutely exasperated with me. They just couldn't understand why I wanted to make a ceramic chair. And they said, look, you're taking a really long time doing this, and it might be good, it might be terrible. You can obviously model, why don't you just keep on, you know, knocking out what it is that you do, and, you know, you can obviously do well. And so the compromise we came to was that I continued to do some figurative work. I did the chair, and I knocked it out in my second year, but I did research into other things, ceramic architectural detail. And I got a lot more confident that there are other things that you could do with clay, design-wise, pushing the idea of the everyday or sculptural forms, you know, in a really quite large way. And it was because of that, and also when I went on to do my master's, I continued that theme. That, well, let's just say that I also continued doing figurative, and I also got into trouble in my master's. When it came to the assessment at the end of the year, they brought in a designer because I was doing design work along with figurative work. And this designer, quite well known, I won't mention their name, furniture designer, she said, why on earth are you, you know, making design objects when you can model like that, you can sculpt like that? And yes, I struggled with that as a question, but I mean, I got my degree, and a few years later, I went up for my first public art commission, and it was quite a big one. To date, it's the biggest sort of budget that I've handled. And when I was there, someone else was there who was also pitching for the same commission, and it was that same designer. And needless to say, I got it, and she didn't. But that's because I had evidence of doing different things, not just figurative, but also, you know, some quite large-scale design work. And they, well, obviously they trusted me with it, and that has served me quite well. I maintain if there's enough in it for you creatively, and you know, you want to have a go, you should definitely have a go. And yeah, that's my perspective.
I just wonder whether it'd be useful to maybe like give examples of opportunities or more opportunities, or why you think there are more opportunities, or what those opportunities are. But because I don't know, I just think that if people are watching, sort of wonder, like, well, what opportunities do we think there are or are more of?
Well, I suppose I take it out of the area which we're asked, as it were, to believe, because, you know, obviously the arts are an area where there's a lot of journalism. We see a lot of art on the television. We're told a lot about art, but in a sense we feel that there's a temptation to feel there's a certain division between us and what we see going on out there. Mm. Whereas my view is that the world is much bigger than that. And if you can sell something well designed at a reasonable cost to the ordinary person, they will appreciate it just as much as anyone else. And there's more of those people out there who want that material in their spaces. So there are huge markets of ordinary people out there who want the same feeling of an object which they can love, whether that's an image or an object or a chair or a design or a house or any of those things. And we actually have got the opportunities now to reach those people. And in a sense, what isn't happening enough is that an establishment such as this one is still something which is a bit of a mystery to the world at large. And actually, the Art Workers Guild, amongst other institutions worldwide, should be one of those places that people feel is the go-to place for them to find things that are of the highest possible order, which they can have in their own space. So, you know, what we see promoted by places like the Arts Council are all very well, and they're clearly doing a terrific job. And there's also a lot of funding behind that. But that seems, in my view, to be aimed at a very few people in society, whereas actually there's potentially a huge a number of people out there who can make beautiful things and can make a way forward for them to support themselves doing those beautiful things, because there is an audience out there, and at last we can actually reach them.
And do you think that there are a platform? I mean, that technology has sort of cut out or enabled people to either create platforms for themselves, or there are platforms that are sort of more democratic in terms of being able to get your work out to these audiences?
Well, yes, there are lots of them, aren't there? And I think there's an expectation out there amongst audiences that they can actually get that. But the issues which are still problematic are about the communication, about whether the things that they're seeing there are worthwhile. So we need to find ways to back up the narrative of whether those things really are to the level that is required. And you know, we are still producing lots of young people who potentially could make a living within the creative industries. And so many of them are still not doing that. And you know, there's a big opportunity that we're missing, and they're missing as well. And it's a difficult thing to unpick, because I know there's a lot of goodwill behind all this. But I think this is an era which will be recognized as one of huge opportunities for creatives. And you know, the subject matter and themes which they can all pursue are incredibly various now. And we are supporting all those views and aspects. And there's not just an audience, there are multi-audiences, and those audiences are fragmenting into tiny audiences, again with a vested interest to promote the areas that they're interested in. And it's happening quicker and quicker and more, probably so quick that we can't quite catch up with it, and also not see, particularly for those entering the business, that those opportunities really exist. That in some ways there's still a rather old-fashioned idea to what opportunities exist. Yes, please.
I'm a retired conservation architect and retrained at Camberwell as a printmaker, and now newly in my new profession. A couple of things I'd like to suggest. One is that I think that what has happened is that society actually expects higher levels of design. They're used to it. If I get a form from the bank, it's well designed. I think people are also much more comfortable at looking at art and actually wanting to acquire it. And it's much more democratic in that sense. But I'm a lithographer, and I use stone lithography as one of my principal methods of work. And what I've found is that people are absolutely fascinated by that hand process. They can see all sorts of things that are reproduced and are available online digitally. And I use digital things. I use laser cutters for relief work and so on. But actually what they want, and it's what the panel have been talking about, is they want that bit of you. They want your hand and your eye and your message. And I think that is actually what we should be encouraging people to develop.
Yes, but you're quite right. And it's something that we have known about for a long time. In a sense, there's a revival of exactly that idea. I'm just recalling exactly what you mean that Thomas Buick, the inventor of wood engraving, at the beginning of his book, has engraved his own thumbprint. And he calls it his mark. And it's such a strong statement of identity and of belonging. Thank you very much for that. We've got some questions coming up from the Zoom meeting. Caroline Connie Flynn says, thank you for the fascinating thoughts and experiences shared. Could you ask the panel, in a very changing and fragile world, how do the artists see the future of the arts and artists in it? Well, I think we did talk perhaps earlier on about how the potential for us definitely responding to change and perhaps even initiating change is perhaps through the vehicles that we have now for communication stronger than ever. Would you agree with that?
I would, yes. Yes, you could say that things are rather less filtered than they ever used to be. People are going to have to make their own choices about what is significant, what is of value. I think because the sheer volume and access now, particularly just the material online, makes it very hard. But I think because people can see everything, they are put in a position of being able to choose and make their own decisions from that, and not just be given a pre-digested way of looking at the world. I think there is real ability for choice to be made from what's out there. I think it's still a time of transition, to be honest. Yeah.
There's another specific question for you, Nick. This is Peter Kindersley asking, photography has always been driven by technology from film to digital. With newer cameras offering video, are you tempted or have you already started making films for your clients? And if so, has it excited you with a new medium to play with?
Well, I don't do much in the way of moving image. I mean, bits and pieces. I think I will do in the future, but it's something I want to feel that I have time to really properly engage with. At the moment, my still work takes up time, so actually, I haven't really got time to do it, to be honest. Yeah, I'm too busy doing other things. But I will, yes. I know Peter's was early into video. Yes, I know that.
Did you want to ask a question?
The sort of combination of change and technology and things. I was at the Observer building in Hastings the other day, and they'd made lots of figures, rather like yours, Taslim, of the population. So there were everyday people, which was super, in everyday clothes and all their sort of scruffinesses. And even these little figures, there's probably a couple of hundred of them out in this newly opened building, had all their sort of scruffy bits and pieces and odd clothes and things like that. So it was a combination of humanity and a bit of technology. Okay, it was 3D printing, but it was very human. Oh.
Thank you. Don't get them too close together. Some feedback. Is there any more questions from the? Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Good.
So we've heard quite a lot tonight about how the role of the individual in art, and I'm just really curious in what ways the panelists feel that they've been encouraged to change their kind of artistic self-narrative, and what you include in terms of your personal journey, or is there a shift away from talking about your sort of moving away from talking about the awards that you might have received to how you're producing your art, and is there a sort of commercial pressure? I mean, you see so much people talking about their personality and their art and their personal journey. Has how you've talked about your art changed in the face of that commercial pressure, and has your art become more personal as a result?
But thank you for that question. We had a pre-discussion before we started this evening, and very strongly the word love came out. We all actually agreed that in the end, what we were communicating and essentially our purpose was to make work which moved people and spoke very directly about love, just simply, and all the complications that we were putting around our work, such as the audience and materials and techniques and adjustments and difficult times and all those things simply were swept away by the idea that at the end we were offering to people things that we fundamentally cared about and moved us to be making these things. So in one way, the realization is that nothing has changed at all, in spite of the volatility that's going on at the moment. We as artists are still making things that have always been made for people who want those symbols of things that show that there is care around in the world. So I think that was what we had thought about, wasn't it?
To answer the idea of bringing commerce into your work, there are some people who can work to a brief and can work commercially. Equally, there are people that can't. And I find myself that whenever I've tried to think about something in order to make money, what I made was absolute rubbish because the love wasn't in it. As soon as I did something I loved, people wanted to touch it and they wanted it. So it's a very tricky balance to get. And you may spend your whole life trying to get that balance right.
Brilliant.
I think one of the difficulties is because if you are making really sincere work, you really do love it and care about it. There's always that risk that if no one will pay you for it, you'll bloody do it anyway. That is a hard one to manage, isn't it? How do you all feel about that? You know, it's not that you don't value yourselves, but if it's something you're passionate about, there's a pull to bloody do it anyway, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. There absolutely is. And you know, while the commercial success is available, I think if we're genuine, we must make sure that the love is really there. And that if it is commercially successful, it doesn't mean there isn't any love there. And it is, you know, it's a task for us, which is available for us to make objects for the world, which do give us a proper living, but are also beautiful. Yeah.
I think, you know, well, personally, much of what I do is woefully self-indulgent. I do also apply to commission work, and I have been invited to do things too, which is always comes as a surprise. But it really is hard enough to please yourself, you know, with what you do. And you know, the hope is that if you really care about what you're doing, someone else is going to care. I suppose it's about what it is to think and to feel and to be alive here and now, and to be able to communicate something of that. I I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with making work for money. If you're really good at something and people value what you do, that's a noble thing. Well, it helps if you like doing it too, I suppose. But yeah, some people aren't blessed in that way. But it's the creative dilemma, you know, it's something that we all wrestle with. And I don't really have the answers, but I do know that it gives me a lot of satisfaction to just experiment and play.
I think that might be a good note to end on. We have gone slightly over time in our plan. It is 8:10 moment. So we do have some refreshments and we can share our chat. I'm afraid at this point we'll have to say goodbye to our outside viewers, our Zoomers. So thank you very much, those out there, for joining us this evening. I hope some of you out there who may feel that we are the right place for you and there are the right people here for you will come and spend some time within this hall and perhaps talk to more of the guild members about moving your own practice forward. So thank you, those out there in the ether, for joining us, and thank you for those in the hall today. We'll break for some more chat. All right, so thank you. Thank you.